Hello, I'm Judith Williams. I'm standing here in front of a wall that I've made out of papercrete blocks. Got some blocks right here. I wanted to build a house for myself. Many people have that idea, however, they don't know where to begin. They call a contractor. What I did was I started reading and researching about different products. What I wanted was something that was inexpensive, something that I could do myself, something that was good for the environment and used recycled materials, something that would have a beautiful result, that was energy efficient. I had a long list of things. I looked at straw bales, which I think are beautiful and lovely, but I couldn't do them myself. I looked at cob. I loved it. I couldn't do it myself. I tried, and it was too hard. I was about ready to give up when someone tipped me off to papercrete. And originally I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense, making a house out of paper. But once I looked into it and learned the facts about paper in this country and actually made a batch of papercrete, I was convinced this is for me. And this might very well be for a lot of people in this country who are trying to do exactly what I've been doing. In this country, 1/3 of the things that go into the landfill are made up of paper and glass. If we took all of the paper that's put in the landfill every year, it would make a wall around the entire perimeter of the United States 47 feet tall. That's as tall as a 5-story building around the entire United States. It takes 15 trees to make 1 ton of paper. That's 720 billion trees cut down every year, and the vast majority of them ending up in the landfill. So what I do is I go down to the newspaper office in Santa Fe or wherever, and I get recycled newspaper. I have friends save it for me. I pick it up in different recycle places, and I mix up my own batch. I've been working on my formula for about 1.5 years now, and I've come down with what works for me. These blocks are lightweight. I'm not a bodybuilder. I've got a block here about 18 inches by 12 inches. It's lightweight. It's easy to deal with. I can cut it. I can shape it any way I want. I can screw into it. So I've decided that papercrete is for me. And today I want to share with you how I do my papercrete. I want to explain how I got my mixer built, how I make the blocks, and then we'll get into how to form the blocks into a wall and do a little slip forming. And so what we'll do now, I'd like to just take you over to the mixer and explain how we got the mixer made, and then we'll get started on making some papercrete. Here's my mixer. As you can tell, it's had a lot of use. It's really covered with papercrete. I got the plan for my mixer from Mike McCain. He came up with the idea. He has a place down in southern New Mexico. I called him up and I asked him if he'd make me a mixer, and he said, "Oh, it's so simple. You could make one yourself." Well, thanks, Mike. I'm impressed, but I'm not that clever. What I did was I went on Barry Fuller's site, and he has a nice DVD on how to build a toe mixer. So I sent for it and brought it over here and gave it to a group of fellows here, and they fabricated my mixer for me. It's made of a 200-gallon stock tank. It's mounted on the base. Here is the rear end of an old car. I took some rabbits up to the mountains and traded them to a guy who had a nice old car in his yard. He took the rear end off. We brought it back down and took off all of the brake lines and things like that and turned the drive shaft up. They cut a hole in the bottom of my tank and brought the drive shaft up through it and mounted a 22-inch lawnmower blade on there. So it's hooked up so that when I tow it behind my truck, it moves the blade and it acts as a giant mixer. It mulches up the paper and mixes it in with the liquid and the cement and the pumice just fine. So that's how that was done. It's inexpensive. I suppose if you had the skills and the equipment, you could make one very easily yourself. I think next time, it looks as if I'm due for a new mixer, I might look into doing a plastic tank. My seams on this mixer have gotten a lot of leaks, and no amount of Bondo or any other kind of sealer has worked. It's not a huge problem because once the paper is mulched up, it self-seals. But you'll see as the tank is filling, water does drip out. So that's how the tank was built. We put a cover on it. We close the cover. Sometimes I strap it down. I've gotten lazy lately. I just close the cover, and a little bit of the mix does slosh out when I start driving, but not enough to make any difference. So that's how the mixer was built. I'm going to go ahead now and share with you how I actually make the papercrete. Okay, we're ready to get started making a mix. What I have here is an 8-inch pipe coming out of the bottom of the tank. This is where the mix exits into the formulator. This has proved to be a problem for me finding a satisfactory plug or cap for this tank. I've been through several. My first idea, which I shared with my mechanics, was how about we just stick a soccer ball in there and inflate it, and that got a good laugh all around. We tried a thing that they had left over from a sewage project that stuck in there. It was like some sort of a thing that expanded when you turned a screw. That lasted a while and broke in half. I got an expensive cap, which I used to have to screw on and off, which never worked right. And finally, I just went down to the sporting goods store, got myself a soccer ball, and an inexpensive little pump. And this is what I've been doing now. It works the best. And I'll just stick it in here, kind of in its squishy state, and push it in as far as I can. Fill it up so that it really blocks that pipe. This is actually my second soccer ball. The first one was a sort of expensive soccer ball, and it had individually stitched little parts to it, and that they didn't last. This one is just a sort of a cheap one that's molded plastic or something. Okay, I think that's ready to go. We're ready for the water. We'll start the water in. I've tried several different methods of mixing, mulching the paper first and then adding the cement. This works the best for me. The other thing I wanted to mention, a bag of cement weighs 94 pounds, and I in no way can lift a 94-pound bag of cement. And this is all part of when you're working alone and you need to figure out how to do things without somebody there to help you. What I do is I shovel my cement into a 5-gallon bucket. I found that a half a bag of cement just fills a five-gallon bucket. And I only use a half a bag in each mix because I want to keep the cement content down because it adds a lot of carbon dioxide to the planet, and I really don't want to contribute to that in any way. So I've got my cement in my bucket here, and then what I've found works for me is to just tip the bucket, and I can gently roll it, and as it sifts into the tank, the pressure of the water mixes it in with the water. I know it's dusty, that's the problem, and People have suggested that I wear a mask, and sometimes I do wear a mask, but I don't want to talk to you today through a mask, so I'm just going to let the wind blow the dust away. But I have found this is the best way to mix the cement in. The thing about the papercrete is, it isn't really a masonry product. It's a wood product, because it's mostly paper. That's wood fiber. And the cement mixes totally in with the water. And then when the paper mulches up, each little individual wood fiber separates and swells, and the water cement mixture fills in the spaces. So the wood fiber's like a matrix for the cement, which makes a lot of sense. But that does mean that the cement has to be totally mixed. I had in the past put the cement in at a later time, like after the paper, and I would find blobs of cement, which isn't good. Let's get it all out. Kind of stuck in there. Okay, and hope the dust dies down. All right, so I'm just going to keep on mixing this in as well as I can by water pressure and by the mixture of the hose. And after I'm sure that all the cement is incorporated into the water, I'm going to start adding the paper. This is really important, though, to have the cement suspended in the water. I think we're just about there. Get it off the top of the blade. All right. How I measure my paper is, I use a stack about 22 inches high. I'd seen other recipes. I was trying to think of where I came up with this formula. I think it was from the Solberg's book, because every other recipe or instructions had it for measured by weight. And I don't have a scale out here. And so I think they had one in their book that used paper by a 22-inch stack or something. And so that's what I started to do. So I throw the paper in. I separate it a little bit. Some people pre-wet it or pre-shred it, and I don't do any of that. I throw it in. I try not to, well, I'm not going to use this because these heavy glossy magazines with the staples, and they're really not good. That will come out as practically the way it went in. So I'm not going to do that, but I am going to just kind of take these apart. These papers have been sitting out in the rain, and actually they're better that way. They seem to absorb the water more quickly when they've been out in the rain. The other thing I try to do is not let too much paper settle right in front of where the 8-inch pipe is, because I've noticed that sometimes it'll clog up in there. And it's no big deal. It's just that when you go to exit the mix later, you'll end up with one blob of paper that hasn't totally been mulched. So I'm just going to throw these in. I like it when the papers come baled like this because it's easy to measure. I've used other kinds of paper, but I eventually settled on just using newspapers because they're easy to get. If I go down to the newspaper yard right after the guys are bringing in their unsold papers, some of them are still baled up, and that makes it easy for me to transport them back here. Also, they're a uniform shape and size, so it's easy to measure. I have a lot of friends who save their old junk mail and newspapers for me, and occasionally I'll just throw everything in, and when my mix comes out, I find little trinkets from the ASPCA or pretty little turquoise necklaces and things like that. Makes it interesting. It's nice if you have someone else doing this with you. It's a nice communal activity. Sometimes I used to have water pressure that was terrible. I was hauling my water for a while, and it would take maybe an hour to fill this little tank. And I could actually read the paper. while I was putting it in. It was nice. All right, I don't think I'm actually going to even use this amount of paper. When they're baled like this, they're baled really tight, and that may be more than I need. So I'll get the rest of it in here. I put all the newspaper in and try to wet it down as much as I can as I'm putting it in. Capillary action should bring up some of the paper from the bottom up through the stuff I'm putting in. I let the water fill till it's about, I'd say, 3 inches from the top of the tank. $200-gallon tank. I don't know how much water that ends up to be, somewhere almost 200 gallons. Put those out of the way. If people are saving papers for you, you could ask them to put them into a paper grocery bag. Paper grocery bag is good. You can throw the whole bag right in. I mean, you know, take the papers out and spread them around. Throw the bag right in. Except if they have those little hemp or whatever they are, handles, string handles. I rip them off. I don't put them in. I'm leery of anything getting hung up on the blade, as things have in the past. All right, I'm not going to use the rest of these. Got quite a leak here. So the faster I get going, the better. Just going to wet down the top of the paper, and then I'm ready. We've got enough water so we can turn off the water. But then we have to move fast because the leak's coming out. So the next thing to go in is my pumice. I use 2 of these. I'll use these 2 and then I'll fill that one up. I put the pumice right on top of the newspapers. Kind of submerges them a bit. A lot of people don't have access to pumice. We have it here. It's mined right here in the mountains about 40 miles that way. It's a volcanic product, and we've had volcanoes here. If you can't get pumice, you can experiment with other things. I used to use sand, but one day I was picking up my sand and the pumice plant is right there. So I said, well, I'll try pumice instead. Okay, I have another 5-gallon bucket of pumice. I put a total of 2 of these in. As I say, I was using the sand and then switched to the pumice. It floats on top, and then as I'm going, the blade will pull the pumice down with the paper. So I'm about ready to get going. The pumice is just slowly sinking in. If you can't get pumice, use sand or get creative. People are starting to use ground up styrofoam. You can use ground up glass in there. The other thing with the cement, I was getting cement that has fly ash mixed in with it, which I was very happy to get. Up in Farmington from the power plant, they have to recapture the pumice, the fly ash that comes out with the smoke, and it's a wonderful additive to the cement, and it uses another recycled product. It's hard to get a hold of because the state has decided they're going to surface the highways with it, but I did have a source up there, and hopefully I'll be able to get it again. Okay, now that everything's in there, we got to move fast and get it mixed up, get everything mulched. So I'm going to hop in the truck. I'm going to drive about 5 miles an hour, and you're going to see it mix up. It's just incredible. Okay, here we go. It's interesting, as soon as I start moving, that blade starts turning in there and pulling the paper down in. And as that paper goes down in, it's churned up, it's mulched, as I said before, the cement it sloshes out a little bit. Once it's the consistency of oatmeal, we won't have that problem so much. In the beginning, it does slosh out the top, and normally I have the lid closed. However, for this demonstration, we're letting you see what happens when the blade turns. But ideally, I would have that plywood lid closed and buckled down with a nice ratchet strap or something. Good, that should be just about mixed pretty well, I would think, by this point. I try to go about 5 miles an hour, but there is a place where I hit a straightaway where I really speed up and churn it up real well, just to make sure we don't have any lumps or anything. Okay, I'm going to stop now and I'm going to close my lid. I would say that mix is pretty well mulched up and combined. Right now I'm headed for my form. I've made a form and I've set it up over here. I'll explain it to you when we get over. The form is made so that I can drive right over it. It fits between the wheels of my truck and my mixer, and all I have to do is drive over the mold and let the mix out into the mold. This takes my ultimate steering skills to get right on the middle of this thing as I drive over it. I've gotten a little better at it. I've had a few mishaps, but I can drive right over it. And I've measured from the outlet of my tank to the front door of my truck so that I've put a little marker here on the ground. And when I get up there, I should be in the right place to let... Okay, I'm going to hop out and check. That should be right. Let me just see here. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Okay. I need to take the... disconnect this first. Make sure this is going to come loose. And I'll actually set it down on the ground a little bit. This to me is the trickiest part, but the most fun part, because I get to see what I've got here. I've got to let the air out of the ball. Come on, come on. Get this apart. There. Okay. Let the air out of the ball. And I'm just going to move this a little so it ends up in the form rather than on the side of the form. There. How's that? We've got a leak over here. Just knock it back. It's a wet mix. It's very wet, wetter than what I'm used to. But it'll be fine. It's always good in the end. I'm going to move my mixer up a little bit so I can finish emptying it. There. Actually, it's easier when you have a wet mix because you don't have to coax it out with the hoe or the rake or anything. All right. Whoops. Let's put this down. Okay. As you can see, the water starts leaching out right away. It's amazing, but within about 30 minutes, we should be able to take this mold right off, this form right off. I made the form out of the decking material. I had made my forms before out of conventional 2x6 pine, and they ended up warping. So I went and got this composite stuff. I think it's a lot of plastic. I should dam that up, I guess. I'll just get a little piece of this and dam it up right there. And I can shovel it back in. There, that's good. And another thing, I think when I made this new form, this is only about maybe the third or fourth time I've used it, but I've noticed it doesn't fill to the top. So it's probably just a tiny bit larger than my other one was. But that's okay as long as I distribute the stuff evenly in here. The blocks will be good. The water leaches out pretty quickly. It would be good if I could find a way to recapture the water and reuse it, and I've thought about it, but I just am not that high-tech or clever. I know other people are putting their forms over a trough and recatching the water and pumping it back in, which is a great idea. It takes me about 45 minutes, I would say, from start to finish with the entire process. On a good summer day, when I have a long day, I can make about 10 batches of blocks. That makes me, maybe 20 1-foot square blocks, about 4 or 5 inches thick. And I can go make 10 loads of them easy. If you have help, it's easier too. And I just move the form along, and I make long lines of blocks. I let them sit there for a couple of days. I'll show you how I cut them in a minute. But just leave them on the ground. I put underneath it some of this weed barrier fabric. It's 3 feet wide and it comes in 100-foot rolls. It's very inexpensive, and all it does really is keep the mixture from melding into the mud underneath it. Before I used the fabric, I would end up with a big clump of mud under the blocks, and that didn't work. The other thing is you can also just use, if you have good clay soil on your property, you can just use your good clay soil. I started out doing that, but for me, I switched to the cement because the clay soil took a very long time to set up, and the blocks were heavier than I like. I wanted something lightweight that I could do myself. And so there's the mixing process. We're going to let this sit for a while, and we'll come back in 20 or 30 minutes and I'll show you how we move the form off and cut the blocks. Time has elapsed, maybe 20 or 30 minutes. We can now pull this form off. I put a couple of metal straps across my form because this wood product or whatever it is kind of flexible. I put one in the middle to keep it from bowing out, and I put one at the far end to keep the ends together. But also I have taken a 2.5-inch screw and dropped it down through the middle. So as I pull this off, hopefully, this is a sort of a low mix, but it usually will score it right up the middle. Just put my dolly down under the edge of the form. Just a minute. Something was stuck. Here's the thing about the wind in New Mexico. You can set your watch by it. Afternoon, it's going to be windy. Okay, I've got my form up. All I need to do is pull it straight forward. If I didn't have the wind helping me so much, my landscape fabric would lay down and I could come right across. I'm just pulling it off. It isn't hard. And I'll bring it right up to the end of the one I just did and leave it there. That way we're ready for our next batch. I've got this simple edging tool. You can use a shovel or whatever you like. And I'm just going to go down and along the line that the screw made, cut my blocks. And the way I measure it too is just I go 2 that way and then I can do 2 this way. And go right down the whole row like this, down the middle. That gives me about a 1 square foot block. If you have a bigger tool, then you only have to make 1 motion each time. I happened to find this at an abandoned cabin, and it was just getting ruined, so I thought I might find a use for it, which I did. And it also works well to get the bark off the vigas for your logs for your ceiling. There, almost finished. You can cut these in any shape you want. If you want to make a pattern even, if you wanted to make sort of a template, you could make curved ones and go around curves. I just do it this way. All right, that does one side of it. These are some I did a while back that are already really, really dry. Let me just take one out. It's real simple. They come right out. This block, which I would say is an equivalent size to an adobe, is light. Look at this. 5 pounds most. It's a light block, but it's super strong and easy to work with. So you can use these in the sort of a wet, not wet, but before they're this dry. I let them dry completely because I like them to be lightweight and I can cut them easily. But that's it. It's easy enough. You cut your blocks, you let them sit for 2 or 3 days. You can tip them up on end and let them cure more. And in 3 weeks or so, they're ready to use. In the New Mexico humidity anyway. If you're somewhere else, then you're just going to have to see how it works. But that's it for cutting the blocks. Okay, we're going to get ready now to put up some blocks on the wall. I've already started a wall over here. I'm going to explain a little bit. I do basically the same type of mix, however I alter it slightly. I leave out the pumice and I put in a whole bag of cement. I don't need the pumice in this, and the cement, the more cement you put into it, the less it shrinks, and that's important for a joint. So I go ahead and put in the full amount of cement and the paper, and then leave out the pumice for now. But I have a use for the rest of this. So I have some of my slurry, is what we call it, here in my bucket. I'm going to go over, I'll get up on my wall, and I'll lay a few blocks just for demonstration. Okay, step number 1 is to wet down the wall a little bit. Not a lot, just a little. If I don't wet these down, all of the moisture from my slurry will end up right inside, going into the block, and I won't get a good bond. So I just go ahead and give it a quick go over with the hose, and that'll make it much better. Okay, that's all that takes. Let me just throw that out there. Okay, this is a messy process. I've got some down here. I'm going to bring up a bucket of slurry and dump it on the wall. It's a little wet, so what I'm doing, the water rises to the top of this mix, so if I just tip the bucket a little bit, a little water will drain off and it won't be so wet. But it is nice to have it pretty mushy. I've left large joints between my blocks. This keys them together. I leave them empty until my next row goes up. That way it settles down between. Don't be alarmed. This looks awful. But it works really well to have a wet mix. And it's a bond like any sort of a masonry wall. Just put it on. I want it a little bit thicker than I normally would. But being the type of person I am who is not a great attention to detail type, I don't have to have it perfectly level or anything. I'm going to grab a block here, set it on here, and just let it settle down into that mortar. And once it's on there, don't move it. It needs to form that bond right now. If you try to adjust it or move it, you'll have to put more of the slurry on there. I'm going to put a little more. And I've got another bucket down here. Get rid of a little bit of that water. It just comes pour it off the top, it's fine. Put this here and spread it out a little. These can all be filled in later. The point now is to just get the block up here. Let me grab another block. I'm going to put a little bit more. It dries out very quickly, especially with this windy weather. Okay. Set another one right on there. Now you get the picture. I'm going to take this off. I'm just going to take a minute to explain a few things about making walls. For one thing, when you're doing a papercrete wall, you absolutely must have a good foundation, and you have to keep your blocks up away from the ground, because this will wick water up into it. Just like anything else, if you're building an adobe house or a wood frame house, you're not going to put your adobe or wood frame right on the wall. But even more so with papercrete, you need maybe a couple of rows of cinder blocks or bring your footing up higher. The other thing is, this product is basically made out of paper. It's not approved by the code as a building product right now. It can be used as infill in a post and beam building, but for a bearing wall, it would not pass to get approved. Some people might have issues with the fire, the flammability of it. I have done a flame test on it, just an informal one with a blowtorch. It did not burn at all, and I can include that at the end of the video for any who would like to see it. Also, people have come up with the idea of adding borax or boric acid, which is a flame retardant and a bug retardant. So all these things are still in the works. We have testing going on now, and the main point I want to make about the papercrete, though, if you use it for building any sort of a building, is to keep it up off the ground and have a good roof system with a good overhang to keep water away from it. Other than that, it's a wonderful product. So that's, I just laid a couple just to give you the idea. We can go on, and you do about 3 rows at a time, and then just let it set for a few days and come back in, and you can do a few courses. The other thing I want to demonstrate today, just briefly, is a slip form method. I myself am kind of leaning toward next time doing a slip form for my building, and I'm going to just go ahead and demonstrate that for you now. I have a little section of wall over there that I'm doing a slip form in. So I'm going to hop down from here, and I'll meet you over there. All right, what I've done here is I've saved out some of my slurry from my wall, and I had not added any pumice to that when I put the blocks up with it. I saved some out, and I'm mixing now an equal amount by eye of this. It's called pumice fines. It's the smallest diameter pumice. It comes in all different sizes. It's a volcanic rock. It's mined here in northern New Mexico. I suppose it's mined pretty much anywhere they've had volcanic activity. And it's a very good insulator. It's very lightweight. It's easy to work with. It's inexpensive. And I just love it. I'm going to add a little bit more. This is what I'm mixing up now, is the material that I'm going to put into my slip form. So I want it a little bit stiff. That was a wet slurry mix, so I have plenty of room for pumice in here. And as soon as I get this mixed in pretty well, I'm going to take it over where I have my slip form already set up, and I'll just fill that up and show you how that works. I've got my mix here. I made a form. I have a little area that's like a column between my 2 windows here. It's not a load-bearing wall. The lintels above the windows are going to meet. And so this is just an infill here between my 2 windows. So I'm not worried about it bearing any weight or taking any stress whatsoever. So I've got my mix in here. I'm going to fill up my form. I needed a sort of a curved form, and so I used some roof flashing. That's the time to get creative, is when you're trying to make a form and figure out what's going to hold the stuff, what's not going to blow out, what's not going to snap if you bend it too far. And roof flashing worked really well for me. So I just fill this up and then let it set for a few days. And when I'm ready to do my next one, I just take the screws out and move the whole form up another foot and fill it again. The other thing about papercrete on the walls, when I was doing the other wall over there, I forgot to mention, was that you can set your blocks. They don't have to be perfect on the edges and the corners. What I did, especially with this wall that's just out of view here, they were just all there, kind of jumbled. I came back with my reciprocating saw. I took my level, I drew a level line down my blocks with a magic marker, and I just went right down the whole thing with my saw, and I had a nice clean plumb edge there. So you can do that on all your walls, and you can sculpt the papercrete any way you want. You just have to wear a mask when you do it because it really makes a lot of dust. So I'm going to get busy and start putting my mix in here. Good for the abs and the shoulders and every muscle you have. It's a great exercise. Okay, I've got one more in here, and that'll do it. All right. Now I'll just even it out. You can see the water just drains right out. It doesn't matter. It's going to settle out just fine. It's a beautiful, beautiful product. Okay, so my form is pretty well full. I'm going to hop down and come around. I've really enjoyed sharing with you how I do my papercrete. There are a lot of people experimenting now and doing wonderful things with it. I'm just going to run down again what I love about papercrete. I've had a great time with my project so far. It's actually been fun, although it's been a lot of work. I've lost about 25 pounds, which doesn't hurt. Papercrete, it uses up materials that would go into the landfill. And even more, if you wanted to take more things from the landfill and put it into the papercrete, as I mentioned before, the styrofoam, the glass, or whatever. It has an R factor that is about 3 point something per inch. My walls are coming out to be about 12 to 13 inches thick, so there right away I've got a pretty good R factor of 38 to 40 on my walls. It's lightweight, it's easy to work with, and it's a wonderful product. You could make something out of papercrete and sculpt it into any form you want. If you just want to do a fun project, maybe you want a little playhouse for your kids, a little pooch palace. If you want to get a little more ambitious and build yourself a meditation studio, it's just a wonderful product. Thank you for being with me today. I hope you try papercrete. You can make it in smaller portions if you want to. Visit livinginpaper.com, Barry's site. We have a Yahoo group, and we'd love to have you check in with us. Thanks a lot. The flame retardants or the flammability of the papercrete blocks. My blocks particularly are made with very little mineral content in them. So I'm going to take the torch and I'm going to focus it on my block. This is the same formula I just made with half a bag of cement and the water and the paper. So and the pumice, so the pumice adds mineral content too. So I'm just going to turn on my torch here. I'm going to focus it on here for 5 minutes at 1 inch away. And we have a breeze today too, so that's helping. Say it's 1,000 degrees. 1,000 degrees pointed at a block for 5 minutes. 900 degrees. It's glowing red. The back is completely cool. It's not burning. We're at 1.5 minutes. Doesn't seem to be any change after 1.5 minutes. It looks the same as it did before. Still cool on the back. We're at 2 minutes now. Still glowing. The dark circle around it doesn't seem to be spreading any at all either, so it's interesting. It's not even igniting or anything. 3 minutes. I put my shadow, you can see it glowing. Four minutes. Still cool on the back, completely cool. It's reflecting the heat out to the front. Five minutes, time is up. Okay, it's not glowing anymore. I can feel the heat coming off of it. It's not even hot. It's hot maybe 1/2 inch in from the edge. But as you can see, I can hold my hand right on it. It's not hot here. Nope. But this is crumbly ash. Got a stick. It's crumbly ash. We'll keep an eye on it and see if the ash spreads. In fact, I'll find my Sharpie and draw a line around the edge and check on it after a while and see if it's changed any. Okay, so some people like to build their houses out of sticks and lumber. Let's see how that holds up to the flame we just held on the papercrete. We got it 1 inch away. We're counting the time. It's burning. It's flaming in 5 seconds. 10 seconds, it's flaming. Okay. That's how it burns with the flame. What people do when they build a frame house, they take their 2x4 frames or 2x6 or whatever. They put sheetrock on either side. They say, okay, the flame won't go through the sheetrock. Well, what about everything else? You know, it's made out of wood, your door frames and stuff. Well, it will be here too. But it's not going to transfer into my papercrete, as we've seen here. So anyway, that was just a fun little test. This would be completely gone now if I'd left the flame on it. But my papercrete's still sitting here. I can hold my finger on it where I had the torch. You'll see me in a sec. I'll be right there. Oh, somebody needs to shut off the water. Since when?
5 minutes.
Oh, good. Okay. I got rid of some of these support things so we wouldn't have a jungle to get through. Hello, I'm Judith Williams. I'm standing here in front of a wall that I've made out of papercrete blocks. I've made them out of Come on, you rode with them in the truck all the way up. You can take it.
I rib him all the time. He ribs me. So, you know. Yeah, I'm just getting even.
I already got my shirt dirty trying to prepare for this morning. I looked all nice and clean, and it doesn't take 5 minutes for me to get messed up.
No.
Hi, I'm Judith Williams here in northern New Mexico. I'm standing here in front of a wall that's made out of blocks that are made of papercrete. I've made the blocks myself out of a mixture of paper and pumice and a small amount of cement. About 4 years ago, I decided I was going to build a house for myself, and I started to investigate different alternative methods, having in mind being kind to the environment. Yeah. Hello, I'm Judith Williams. I'm standing here in front of a wall that I've made out of papercrete blocks. I've made them out of If we do this too many times, it's just going to get worse.
Relax.
I'm trying to relax, but it's not natural for me to just have to think about what I'm saying. I'm not a thinker. I'm a doer.
Do it.
All right. As I'm driving, those blades are pulling the mix down in, and as I said, one of the great advantages to that pumice is that it will float in the mix. It won't sink to the bottom like the sand did. It's amazing how quickly the paper mulches in. Okay. I'm going to speed up a little now. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out and I'm going to close the lid. Oh, the whole thing came out.